There is a version of wealth that looks nothing like what you were taught. No sports cars in the driveway, no designer watches, no obvious signs that anything unusual is happening financially. Just a quiet, compounding, almost invisible process that separates the people who build lasting wealth from the people who earn good money their entire lives and arrive at the end with very little to show for it. The strategies that actually build wealth are not secrets exactly. They are available. They are documented. But they rarely get discussed in the same rooms where ordinary people are making financial decisions. And that gap between what the wealthy actually do and what everyone else believes they do is one of the most expensive misunderstandings in personal finance. So here is what is actually happening on the other side of that gap. The first thing wealthy people understand that most people do not is the difference between income and wealth. These two things are not the same. They are not even close to the same. Income is what arrives in your account. Wealth is what stays and grows. You can have a very high income and build almost no wealth. You can have a moderate income and build significant wealth. The variable is not how much comes in. The variable is what happens to it after it arrives. Economist Thomas Piketty, whose research on wealth inequality transformed how economists understand the subject, demonstrated that returns on capital have historically outpaced growth in wages. In plain terms, money that is working generates more money than work alone ever can. The wealthy understand this not as an abstract economic principle, but as a daily operating reality. They are not primarily focused on earning more. They are focused on deploying what they have, so it earns on their behalf. The second thing is that wealthy people pay themselves first. Not what remains after expenses. Not what is left over at the end of the month. First, before lifestyle, before discretionary spending, before the temptations of a larger paycheck get absorbed into a larger lifestyle. This is one of the most well-documented patterns in personal finance research. Author and financial educator David Bach called it the latte factor, but the principle runs far deeper than coffee. Every income increase, without a corresponding commitment to capture a portion of that increase before it reaches your spending account, gets absorbed by what researchers call lifestyle inflation. The raise disappears into a nicer apartment, a newer car, more frequent dinners out. The income went up, the wealth did not. The mechanism wealthy people use to break this cycle is almost embarrassingly simple. Automation. The money moves before they see it, before it enters the spending account, before it becomes available to spend, before the brain registers it as available income. It goes directly into investment accounts, retirement vehicles, or assets. The savings happen without willpower, without discipline, without a decision being made in the moment. The system makes the decision in advance when the cognitive load is low and the temptation is absent. The third pattern is that wealthy people think in assets, not purchases. This sounds simple. It is actually one of the most significant mental shifts in how financial outcomes diverge over time. A purchase is something you buy. An asset is something that works for you after you buy it. A car is a purchase. It depreciates. It costs money to maintain. It generates nothing. A rental property is an asset. It generates income. It may appreciate. It works while you sleep. An index fund is an asset. It compounds. A business equity stake is an asset. The wealthy are constantly evaluating every significant dollar, not by what it buys, but by what it could become if deployed differently. This does not mean wealthy people never spend money on things they enjoy. It means they make a conscious distinction between consumption and deployment. And they are ruthlessly protective of their capital from being consumed by things that do not build toward something larger. Author Robert Kiyosaki framed this as the difference between assets and liabilities in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And while the framing is simple, the underlying principle has been validated repeatedly in research on wealth accumulation. High-income earners who accumulate assets build wealth. High-income earners who accumulate liabilities do not. The income was nearly identical. The destination was not. The fourth pattern is tax efficiency. This is where the gap between wealthy behavior and ordinary financial behavior becomes most dramatic and most invisible. The average person pays tax on income when it arrives, spends what remains, and saves a portion of what is left. The wealthy structure their financial lives so that tax is minimized at every stage, not through illegal means, through the legal architecture that exists precisely for this purpose, and that is available to anyone who takes the time to understand it. In Canada, the tax-free savings account allows investments to compound completely free of tax on gains, dividends, and withdrawals. The registered retirement savings plan defers tax on contributions, reducing taxable income today while allowing decades of tax-sheltered compounding. The First Home Savings Account combines both benefits for eligible first-time buyers. Corporate structures allow business owners to retain income inside a corporation at a lower tax rate and deploy it into investments before personal tax is applied. The wealthy do not use these structures because they are wealthy. They became wealthier partly because they used these structures. The accounts are available to ordinary Canadians. The knowledge of how to use them is what separates the outcomes. Financial planner and author Garth Turner, who has written extensively on Canadian personal finance and investing, has consistently argued that most Canadians dramatically underutilize their available tax-sheltered room. Unused TFSA contribution room accumulates. It does not disappear. But every year it sits unused is a year of tax-free compounding that cannot be recovered. The fifth pattern is that wealthy people are comfortable with calculated risk, not reckless risk, not gambling. Calculated, researched, diversified exposure to investments that carry short-term volatility in exchange for long-term growth. The ordinary approach to risk is to avoid it. Keep money in savings accounts. Hold cash. Wait for certainty before deploying capital. But certainty never arrives in investing. The market is never perfectly calm. The economy is never perfectly stable. Waiting for the right moment is, as we have discussed, one of the most expensive decisions a person can make. The wealthy understand that risk is not something to be eliminated. It is something to be managed. Diversification across asset classes, geographies, and time horizons is how you take on market risk without being destroyed by any single outcome. A globally diversified index fund does not eliminate risk. It distributes it so broadly that no single failure can be catastrophic. Vanguard founder John Bogle spent decades making this argument. That ordinary investors, by simply holding a low-cost diversified index fund and refusing to panic sell during downturns, would outperform the vast majority of actively managed funds over any sufficiently long time horizon. The wealthy did not need a genius fund manager. They needed patience, diversification, and low fees. And those things are available to anyone. The sixth, and perhaps most counterintuitive pattern, is that wealthy people spend less than you think on status. The research on this is striking. The best-selling book, The Millionaire Next Door, by Thomas Stanley and William Danko, documented through extensive survey research that the majority of millionaires in America live in modest homes, drive ordinary cars, and spend carefully. They do not look wealthy. They are wealthy. And those two things, in their experience, are in direct tension. Every dollar spent on looking wealthy is a dollar not compounding toward being wealthy. This does not mean frugality for its own sake. It means intentionality, spending freely on things that genuinely matter, spending carefully on things that do not, and being ruthlessly honest about which category most purchases actually fall into. The version of wealth that gets shown on social media, the cars, the watches, the first-class flights, is almost entirely the opposite of how wealth is built. It is how wealth is displayed by those who either inherited it or are spending it down. The people quietly building it are almost invisible, because building wealth looks boring, and boring does not get clicks. So here is the actual list. Pay yourself first, automatically, before lifestyle inflation captures the increase. Think in assets, not purchases. Structure your accounts for tax efficiency, and use every dollar of available room. Accept managed risk through diversification rather than avoiding risk through inaction. And stop spending money to look wealthy at the direct expense of becoming wealthy. None of these are secrets. None of them require a high income, a financial advisor, or insider access. They require understanding, and a decision made once in advance before the next paycheck arrives. The gap between what the wealthy do and what most people do is not a gap in income. It is a gap in structure. Build the structure, and the outcome follows.